Okay, I believe that we're live, Trina, and this is a Monday. We always meet live at this time and then repost it on Facebook. And today is Martin Luther King Day, which is a very special day and has a special place in your heart, doesn't it?
Oh, it sure does, Scott. I've done a lot of things toward this sort of thing, and the one you see right behind me is the oldest and the most recent in a sense because I brought it out after George Floyd was killed, and we had all this new interest in marches and other things like that. Okay, yes, this is it, and it was. I had it in front of my house. I have it in front of my house right now in the snow. It's an outdoor poster that I've made for that, and then uh, show you this also, Scott. This is a little tile that I did when I was in Portugal. That was after I was evacuated from Egypt in the 1967 war. I ended up in Paris, and then I spent 3 months in Portugal. And they do tiles. They love tiles over there. So we did that then.
Wow, I've not seen that before. That is very special. Can you hold it by the edges so that we can see the entire?
You can see it's the same thing.
That's wonderful. I've never seen it with a flower and on a tile.
No,
What's,
it's I don't have any more of those tiles. I mean, they're I have one. This is the only one that isn't broken. And I have one more that is broken. That's it. So these are old things from my past. But I thought we might like to say something. I think I want to start with the quote from Martin Luther King. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. Isn't that beautiful, by the way? Mutuality. Tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its boundaries. That was a separate little quote. And that was because I go back with my original hands to 1963. And I was looking up today some of the things that were happening in 1963 that caused me to make this poster. And it was a very significant year for the world and the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement had been going on since 1954, pretty much, with the Supreme Court saying that segregated education was basically unjust and against the Constitution. And then the South just insisted on the segregation and the segregation. And then there were going on at this time were the freedom riders and the people trying to get people to vote and all these different things. And in Selma and the Montgomery boycott and the Birmingham situation and the murders of the civil rights movement people. This was all happening around this time. And 1963 was a year for me to start the activism that has informed my life since then. Just a little quick thing, very quick. Before that, I was basically a fundamentally peaceful, focused on religious things primarily, and the justice within our gospel. I was never, and I remember at the age of 12, about the only thing that it was at all kind of memorably political, my father took me to a conference at John Carroll University that was right across from our church in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. And it was about, I remember asking a question. It's sort of like I remember some of the adults talking about sexual things that I didn't understand then, and they just stayed in my mind until I understood them. Well, this was another one. This was about, imperialism. And I remember asking what imperialism was and the injustice that bothered me when I heard about it there at 12. And so this is a little bit of the history of my involvement and from 1963 on. And this was one of the important things of my growing up. I remember I'm 93 now, and I grew up through the 40s when it was a very anti-communist time. We know that from the McCarthy area and all this kind of thing, and the problems in Hollywood and all over. And the Catholic Church was very anti-Catholic, anti-communist, and you weren't supposed to work with communists, it seemed to me. And I remember this is my high school days, and Pete Seeger and the Weavers were looked down upon because they were considered to be communist sympathizers. About that was this whole time of persecution of that. And then I remember when 1963 came by, Pope John the 23rd, this wonderful Pope who started the whole conference to change the church. It says the church is stuffy. We have to open some windows and get some air in here. And he called the Vatican Council. But he also published Pacem in Terris, that's peace on earth. And he published it for everybody of goodwill in the whole world. Just like this Pope has published Laudato Si, it's called in Latin, but it's also our common home in English. And that's written for the whole world too in 2015. But this is 1963. And I carried that one around with me. I just carried this little thing around. I was at Grailville, where I came in 1949 after I was graduated from high school. And that is so important. And in 1963, there I was carrying this thing around with me because it had said in it that we can work with everybody of goodwill, including communists. I mean, for a Pope to say that word and say that we can work with each other like that, it was a big, wide open, wonderful thing for me. And I remember in 1963, this is how I got to be becoming such an artist with the peace movement and becoming an activist. We heard that there was going to be a UN day. I think it's the 22nd of September, and it still is that day. And they were going to raise the UN flag in the plaza in Cincinnati, which is about 20 miles from us. And they wanted to do it early, and the mayor was supposed to come and do it early before the John Birch Society would come and protest. So some of us got into one carload, and we went in there, and we came, and there was nobody around at all. The plaza in the middle of Cincinnati was all empty and strange, and we just sort of wandered around. And then the mayor did not come. We did not raise the UN flag at that time. And who did come up at that time were these older women with a banner that they unfurled that was about 20 feet long and about 5 feet high, with a huge American flag on it and the text next to it that said, "This is the only flag to which we pay allegiance." And who got her picture taken in front of that poster? Me. And we had come in without a badge or a sign or anything to show where we stood, that we were for peace in the world. So that was a lesson to me. So I never in my life now have gone to a protest or done anything without a sign to show where I'm at, and also to say something to the people watching, because that's what you're doing it for. You're not doing it for yourself. You know why you're there. Like I knew why I was there that day. So I was also back at Grailville in Loveland, Ohio, 20 miles away. I was also teaching a little art class. And someone had given us a big stack of black posters. they were nice size. They were the size of these hand widths picture, like 2 by 3 feet. And so what we did, we had people draw all kinds of things, either with white paint or with what this one is done. This is done with a razor blade on white paper, just cut around with a razor blade, and you take the white paper off and you put it on the black thing. So I could make like 20 of those once I had the model done. And we then put all those in, and there was a big civil rights march, the first civil rights march that I know that we ever had up around the Cincinnati area. Well, that was in October, just a few weeks later. So we brought in about 50 posters, and 30,000 people in Cincinnati showed up. That was a record. I think it was a record-breaking thing that never happened before. There was never a rally that I can remember that around that. There just weren't rallies. There weren't these demonstrations that there have been since then. So we went in, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful thing. Well, that year I was still making my annual catalogs of art production, and you've seen some of that if you've watched this before, where I was doing things like making this nativity, and this is a little Madonna in it that waits for the baby to come during Advent, and I've done some more of those. I did a lot of those things. Every year I would make a catalog with more sculpture and more prints. Well, I decided after this experience in 1963 that I would go away for a couple of months and make a whole series of peace posters so that we could have dignified, beautiful images when we went on our protests. So Scott, maybe you want to run through a couple of them. I see that we have some already registered here, Scott. So this is the time for those, please. This is to give beauty to the protests. And this is part of our art production program. So we made these available to people in our catalog. This one is by John Kennedy, Healthy Controversy, the hallmark of healthy change. And then this one is so appropriate for today. I have one great fear in my heart, that one day when they have turned to loving, we will have turned to hating. This was from South Africa, the words of Alan Paton, who wrote Cry the Beloved Country. And it was a black minister talking to a little white boy that he had made friends with. When the little boy was ready to leave, he said this to him. And it just moved me so that we don't do this, and that we build the bridges of our society and find unity again. And that I'm just hoping that the new administration, with its claim to become a peace place and bring people together, can do that. And I pray for that very much today, that does happen in some way that we don't know of yet, but can. And we just pray for that today, along with remembering Martin Luther King and his efforts toward unity. So this is another one. This is from one of the popes. Okay. And this one, Recipe for Peace. So thank you, Scott. So here we are. I just thought this poster behind me, I tell you a little bit more how it's been used over the years. Okay, I wrote some of these things down so I could remind myself a bit. So it was used as a logo for Global Education Associates, trying to bring people around the world into an education about the need for peace. It was used for the Eco Sabbath, which was an effort that we had around the country too, to start to work for the earth and start to work for what we're trying to do now with work with global warming and climate change and the degradation of the earth and do what we can. We were already doing that in the early 60s. And then what was interesting, when I came to Montclair, before that even, 1969, the International YWCA found me in Paris, and they wanted a Catholic on their staff for this International Training Institute, which was bringing 40 women from around the world, and a lot of them were Catholic. So the YWCA wanted, the YWCA wanted a Catholic on their staff. So that was me. It was a very interesting experience because Catholics are not known to be teetotalers. And yet all the people who are Protestant in this group, at night after the programs were over, they would tend to go out to bars. And I'm the one who didn't drink. And it was very, very strange reversal of stuff. But we couldn't have wine on Holy Thursday because it was a YWCA. So very, very strange things happen in this world. And this is one of the little funny memories of it. But they brought us together, and it was very much the time in 1969 when I was brought back to the United States. By the way, they paid for my trip back from Paris. And we focused on Black theater and arts. Harlem people of Harlem, all the wonderful theater that was going on then, and people came to us and gave lectures, Black artists. So it was very much of an interracial reality, and it was wonderful to see later on when I came to Montclair. The YWCA there had a floor-to-ceiling painting of this image, vertical, coming up and down, the whole height of the top of the ceiling to the floor was that painting. So that was exciting to see in about 1978 when I came to Montclair and bought a house here in 1980. So I go back so long that it's hard to get these dates in shape. So, but that image has been with me and used by me for a long time. And I said something before about this is a day of prayer that should be. And I wanted to bring this statue forth. I call her prayer. It was a cast of marble, a plaster cast from my only marble carving. And I hear that it has been found down in Florida someplace. But this is called supplication or prayer. And I think that's what we need to do for our country and our world, is to pray and to work and to share with each other. And I feel that sort of the theme that Scott and I have been using, and I'm using for my book and my work, radical sharing, freely chosen. Both parts are so important. We need to find a way to share our wealth and our ideas and our love with everybody. And that's pretty much the story of Hope for the Flowers and the caterpillars daring to become butterflies so that they then can fly around and with every flower they meet, share the love of one flower to another and receive their fruit, their nectar, and discover their beauty. And that's the way to live. And what a wonderful world it could be if we did some of that. So perhaps that's enough for today. And we all join in prayer for peace and unity in our country and the world. Amen, everybody.